So we're going to get started. Good evening and welcome. It's so terrific to have with us all of our students and our alumni for what has been a very active alumni season, thanks to the many efforts of our Office of Alumni Affairs and our alumni council members, Laura Ross and Seth Harris. Now, some of you have attended our recent networking sessions earlier in the year, and tonight we are really excited to be hosting a panel conversation on the important topic of where are alumni now? And we are looking at alumni and their career pathways. So where are they out? Where are they now? Well, tonight, our alumni are here with us in our Zoom room to share their career experiences and some of their insights as to how they got their job, where they see the industry going, and so forth. And we're thrilled to have back with us Rhina Garcia, Amanda Orozco, and Sam Grindell in a conversation moderated by Laura Ross. I will turn it over to Laura now in just a few minutes to introduce our panelists and the format of the program tonight. But first, I did want to welcome you on behalf of the Center for Publishing and really to thank everyone who's worked so hard on the event tonight, including our wonderful Sonal Pandey and Daniel Orenberger Hopkins from the Office of Alumni Affairs for all of their hard work, and special thanks to Laura Ross for managing this important conversation. And now, over to Laura and to our alumni to hear more about what's going on in their life and their careers. Laura, over to you.
Thanks so much, Andrea. I'm so happy to be here. So happy to be speaking with students and recent alumni about their career experiences so far and where they're going next. I'm going to start by introducing each of your panelists tonight so you can get to know them a little bit before we jump into questions. So I'll start with Rhina. Rhina Garcia currently works as an assistant publicist for the William Morrow Day Street imprints of HarperCollins. She has worked on a variety of campaigns across fiction and nonfiction authors, such as Alexis Daria, Karen Slaughter, Samantha Power, and Joseph Reverend Simmons. A graduate of NYU's Publishing Master's Program, Rhina also received a bachelor's degree in journalism from the University of Florida. Originally from South Florida, she is currently in Brooklyn, New York, and loves everything about it. Welcome, Rhina. I was wondering if you could share with us, for your very first introduction to this group, your COVID win this year. I know it's been hard for a lot of us, but I'd love to hear, what was your win during this time?
Thank you, Laura. I think my win was, after not touching a guitar for like 10 years, I picked it up again. And I remembered some of what I knew. So that was kind of fun to get back into that.
Well done, you. I took ukulele lessons a couple of years ago, and I've been doing like digital ukulele meetups, which has been a real source of joy every month.
Yeah, we should start a band.
Right?
Yeah.
Women in publishing on string instruments. Go.
Exactly.
All right. Samantha Grindell is a Georgia peach who moved to the Big Apple in 2017 to get her MS in publishing from NYU. Today, Samantha is a lifestyle reporter at Insider, which you might be more familiar with as Business Insider, where she writes about weddings, tiny homes, the royal family, and interior design. She was previously a staff writer at the parenting website Romper, and her writing has also appeared in Cosmopolitan, Mike.com, and Oprah.com. Sam, tell us about your COVID win this year.
Hi, everyone. I'm so happy to be here with you all. Thank you, Laura, for that introduction. I would have to say my COVID win is that I got promoted last month. So I was a junior reporter and now I'm a reporter. So yay.
That is huge. You know, in a time when we're hearing different kinds of news from all walks of the industry, hearing people get promotions and doing great things at work is so encouraging. Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you. I feel very lucky.
All right. Amanda Orozco is a literary agent at Transatlantic, based out of Los Angeles. She graduated from NYU with her Master's of Science in Publishing, Digital and Print Media. Before joining Transatlantic, she worked in subsidiary rights at Little Brown and at Park and Fine Literary and Media. While at NYU, she interned at the National Book Foundation, Shreve Williams Public Relations, and the Gernert Company. Amanda, what's your COVID win?
Thank you, Laura. It's so great to be here. Thank you to everyone who joined. I would have to say my COVID win was, though I was sad to leave New York, it was a happy time getting to move back to LA, where my family is based out of, in the surrounding LA area, and just getting to enjoy the sun during what would have been another tough New York winter, being stuck inside. So yeah, just really have gotten a chance to enjoy being in LA again.
That's wonderful to hear. You're probably having weather like what's in my fake background for real today.
It's actually overcast here today, which is just like so funny because it's quite rare.
All right. Well, I think one of the first things that students may want to hear about is our very initial experiences in publishing, right? How did you get your first job in publishing, Sam?
Hi, yeah, great question. Do internships count before I go? Because I have
Yes.
two different stories. Okay, perfect. So my first, I would say, like New York publishing job was an internship at Oprah.com, like Laura mentioned. And I actually found the listing for the job online, but I was super lucky. And my intro to finance professor was an employee of Hearst, which Oprah was part of. So naturally, when I was applying, I went and asked her about it. And she was really lovely and gave me an interview. And I'm sure I had some skills that would have helped me be a good candidate, but I really think that connection with my professor helped a lot. So please, please, please use your professor connections. I can't recommend it enough.
You know, I think that's so important to remember. And one thing that I would remind any students on the call of is the closer you are to graduation, the even more valuable that resource is. So if you haven't already connected with your professors on LinkedIn, on the Violet Network, on whatever social platforms are appropriate, I would recommend that you do so as soon as possible, because you're front of mind for them right now, and can certainly use them as resources when you're hunting for your next job or your current job, whatever the case may be. I think that's just a great tip. Rhina, how did you get your first job in publishing?
So this job that I have now, it's actually, I got it through the program. So I took the publishing and internet law class, and it was one of my favorite classes of the program. And my professor worked as legal counsel for HarperCollins, and he worked a lot. So I work in the Day Street imprint, which does a lot of the like celebrity memoirs. So there's a lot of legal reads done through there. So he worked very closely with my now boss, who is also a graduate of the program. And I saw the position, I applied, and I mentioned it. Through that connection, I was able to interview. And, you know, when I spoke to who was the person who is now my boss, we were able to kind of make that connection too, of being alumni. And and then I got the job. So I've been here for about 2 years, and it's pretty great. It's a very fun job.
That's awesome. Amanda, how did you get your first job in publishing?
Yeah, well, I feel like I have to go back to like the year before moving across country to New York and starting the program. I had been looking on the Penguin Random House and Simon & Schuster boards, and really just putting an application in, having like no idea what I was really applying for. And I think at that point didn't know the difference between the imprints, and didn't know, there was just so much about the industry I didn't know. And so, you know, did not hear back from many of those applications. But once, you know, I was getting closer to starting the program, the assistant director at the time had sent out a job posting for humanities ebook, which I think one of the professors works with. And so very on brand with everybody else's answer, on theme. Yeah, there just was that connection to the NYU program and one of the professors, and it was an electronic academic publishing job. And I was just like, yeah, like I'm gonna go for it. And was still in LA while we were doing phone interviews, and when I got the offer for the job, and like we set the start date for like the week after we got there to New York. So it was a bit of a unique story in terms of getting a job, having not been in New York, but again was through the program.
I think that's interesting. I think increasingly we're going to see folks applying for and securing positions that are geographically diverse in the future. But Amanda, in particular, one thing I was curious about for you, you had lots of different types of jobs in the publishing space, and it's kind of, non-linear for you. Can you talk a little bit about how you might navigate that career path that doesn't look like from, assistant to associate to manager in the same, publishing house, as it were? How have you gone about, finding those different positions in a nonlinear way?
Yeah, that's a great question. And even though it seems nonlinear, looking back, it feels very much like it makes sense, the way that it unfolded. In my undergrad, I was fully prepared to go into the healthcare fields after graduating, and after going through the whole application process, had a moment where I was like, I actually don't know if I want to do healthcare. So, I was doing some soul searching for the 2 years after graduating from UCLA, and was working as a fine art instructor, and was running a studio. And that was when I came across the NYU program and publishing and the industry, and just being able to work in books as a career, which I just had never considered before. So yeah, the NYU program really helped me be able to kind of enter into this industry that, at the time was very still New York centric, and just the way the network is built out. Kind of had to be there. So the program allowed me to move out there and just start building up those connections, from humanities ebook, from doing happy hours, and just joining like literary readings back when those were a thing in real life in bookstores, and going to panels like this one, talking to the panelists afterwards, connecting with them, asking them questions. Was able to then go on to do an internship with the National Book Foundation. And I think from there, really realized that a lot of the people in the industry want to help, people who are starting out and coming into the industry. And so from there was like not afraid to ask questions of the people working at that foundation at the time. And from there, they connected me with who they knew. And so I was doing informational interviews with all of these people, asking a lot of questions, getting a sense of, what each job requires, what each department does, and really kind of more of the granular details. And then from there was able to get an internship at the Gernert Company, which is a literary agency, and Shreve Williams, which was more of a book publicity firm. And so I was very much just trying everything, because I was like, I don't know yet. I thought I wanted to do editorial, but I'm also curious about publicity. How does that work? And agency side, like what do they do? And then realized there was just so much editorial work that goes into being an agent. And then, going over to Subrights at Little Brown, being on the publisher side, really getting an inside look at how a publisher works, all the different departments and how they interact, and how many people touch a book, and how it can sometimes feel like, a bit like delayed, because there's so many people that have to work on one project. So yeah, I think I just gained a lot of great experience that has led me to this point now, where it's like I have book publicity experience that I still use. I have social media experience that I was using at National Book Foundation, and I use that too still. And obviously on the agency side, and my experience at Park and Fine really helped show me just the different agenting styles, and really what it takes to manage a client's career. So yeah, to me, it doesn't feel nonlinear, but I can certainly see that it looks that way from the outside.
No, I get that. And I think there was a nice little gem in there too for students about the value of networking and of panels and events and just having those conversations with the folks who have roles that you're interested in or are doing something interesting in the space. My first job, actually my first full-time job, came from the program, but not directly from an instructor. It came from, a guest lecture or a guest event. Jane Friedman came and announced her new company, Open Road Media. I went to the event and I was like, this is really cool. I've never heard of anything like this startup. They're an ebook publishing and marketing company. And I said, I want to work for you. And, I think those kinds of things may feel bold in retrospect, but they're just conversations. And I think to your point, the folks who are coming to speak to students, they want to help and they're there because they're looking for bright talent to come and join their teams. I mean, we're all really self-interested here. We're looking for great folks to be part of this industry, right? So kind of related to Amanda's experience, Sam, I'm kind of interested in your perspective because I think you intended originally to go in book publishing, but you've since transitioned into the digital space. So what was that like for you? How are you making yourself marketable across the spectrum using skills that you learned in the program or since?
Yeah, absolutely. So I went into the program thinking I was going to be a YA book editor. I loved YA fiction and I was like, of course, that's what I'm going to do. And I'd done some writing in undergrad and I was passionate about that, but I felt like I didn't have journalism skills and it didn't really make sense for me to break out into that. But during my first semester at NYU, the classes I just could not wait to go to were my magazine media classes. And I was so excited about them. And I liked my book publishing classes, but I just didn't feel the same way about them. So I talked to Lindsay, our advisor at the time, about how I could pursue, a more digital media focused path. And I just hadn't familiarized myself with the digital media portion of the program as much. So she encouraged me to take those classes and apply for internships. So I applied for that internship at Oprah. And that really helped kickstart getting some experience in terms of that. But I think the biggest thing the program gave me is kind of a business mind for media. I sometimes joke that I got a business degree specifically for publishing and media because that's really the biggest thing that's helped me from NYU. So I use information from my finance classes, my marketing and branding classes, and my law classes, which arguably were the 3 hardest classes I took all the time. And as I was doing interviews for internships and then my fellowship at Insider, which eventually turned into my full-time job, I could really speak to my understanding of how the business works. I know why page views are important. I know like how that makes the business run. And particularly for Insider, it's a very metric focused company. So I think my ability to speak to that in an interview was really helpful. But yeah, I think it just made me feel confident that I understood the industry, which comes across well in interviews. And then at the same time, I was able to get some really great internships while I was full-time in the program that allowed me to get the writing experience I needed to eventually get the job I'm in now.
Yeah, that's a great note. Rhina, I'm curious if you could talk a little bit about this, the same sort of thing. Like, what was your experience working and or searching for roles or interning while in the program? Because that simultaneous in-class and internship moment is so critical, I think, to a lot of our success.
Yeah, I mean, it was not easy. It's not like an easy thing to do to go to work and then go to class at night, but seeing how the things that I did at work, how they were so incongruent with the things I was learning in class. And, to this day, I still feel like sometimes I'll be sitting in meetings and I think, oh yeah, we talked about this in class one time. And so it's such a cool experience to have to kind of just go into your job and get sort of an inside scoop on how things operate, get that experience, but also going to class at night and getting insight into getting another insight, another view of the industry. And, you know, working in publicity, we work a lot with media. So we work a lot with both print and digital media. And taking those digital class, because my capstone focus was digital, even though I work in books. So I had kind of the opposite trajectory that Sam had. I went in with intentions of working in the digital sphere, and I ended up in book publishing. But yeah, just kind of getting those digital and print and magazine classes and seeing how they function, getting those industry insights, and then applying them to my job as a publicist, as someone who works with media contacts. It's really rewarding. And for as difficult as it was, I think it was a great experience. And I'm very thankful for all of those resources.
I want to shift gears a little bit and talk about networking. How do you all approach networking if you're maybe not a natural networker? And when I say networking, I mean the whole gamut. So digital, social, and someday in person. What does that mean to you? What do you do? Anyone want to start?
I'll start. Yeah, I feel like it is something that, like, maybe 5 years ago, if you had asked me, I'd been like, I don't know. That sounds really scary. But it's also interesting for me to look back and think about my time as a fine art instructor and how I did have to cold call people as a part of the job, you know, to see if they'd be interested in taking art classes. And so just kind of getting used to that discomfort of like first initial outreach, I think really helped in terms of reframing, like, oh, it's actually not that bad. The worst thing they can do is say no or ignore me. And, you know, there's always more people I can meet. And so I think, you know, it was through the NYU program and through just doing a lot of informational interviews. I think I just came to realize that at the end of the day, you're a human talking to another human. You both love books, or, you know, whichever area that you're talking about. And if there's a curiosity there that you're bringing to the conversation, you know, it'll feel more natural. And, you know, you don't have to think of it as networking. You can really think about it as like, hey, I want to know more about you. I want to know more about what you do and how you got to where you are, and just have those questions ready. And, you know, I am more of an introverted person, so it is a bit of a challenge. You know, you do have to work yourself up to, you know, meeting strangers, cold emailing, cold calling, and just making requests of people of like, hey, do you know anybody who might be interested in talking to me? They might say no, or they might just not feel comfortable. But I think for the most part, I've just seen a lot of success with being willing to ask questions and kind of showing a desire to learn. I think, like I said, a lot of us in the industry really do want to help out people who are starting out, because we have all been there, especially us as having, you know, been recently there. So yeah, don't be afraid to reach out. If you don't hear back, you can follow up, you know, because we also are all busy, and don't be scared to do that. Obviously, you don't want to be following up every day or being too obnoxious, and just kind of recognizing that like people are doing a lot of things and maybe in a situation where they can't, or they don't have the time to. But yeah, I think just kind of getting used to doing that really helped me, and just thinking about, yeah, these are just humans that I'm reaching out to. What's your favorite book? You know, talking about books that you've read recently. So
I think that's a really strong point. And just to add, I think what you're getting at too is sometimes having a specific question as an icebreaker can be really useful in those cold calls or those initial outreach moments. I really appreciate if somebody reaches out to me on LinkedIn with a specific question or a topic that they want to know a little more about. If it's, you know, for an informational chat, I think sometimes that can pique the person's interest a little more when you're reaching out kind of cold. Sam, do you have any thoughts on networking, on strategies that work for you? I mean, I feel like we're so lucky to have an agent, a reporter, and a publicist to talk to today. You guys are the chief networkers that I am aware of.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think, similarly to Amanda said, it helps a lot to just think of anyone you're reaching out to as just another person. But for me, really, and especially, I guess, being in digital media, networking can be very casual. It doesn't have to feel like this big, scary thing. I network a lot on Twitter, and I follow people I think are good reporters, and I'll message them and be like, hey, I really liked this article you did. And I've actually made some really good friends that way too, which is cool in these virtual times. And that's also how I find subjects to interview for stories. So I think kind of maybe just shifting what you think of as networking. Like, I think as the world becomes more digital, it doesn't have to be this big formal scary thing all the time. I mean, I'm not going to DM the editor-in-chief of the New York Times and be like, hey bestie, but in my normal life I am going to message other reporters I like and ask them how they did things, and it's just helpful to kind of take the pressure off it for everyone. And I know I've been really responsive when people have reached out to me in a similar context. So if someone DMs me and is like, hey, I really like what you write, how'd you get your job? I totally answer and want to help them. So I figure someone's probably going to do the same for me.
I think that's so encouraging right now. One thing we were talking about a little bit earlier, Amanda, was, you're working outside of the New York City bubble. And to some extent, that can be a challenge for networking, or at least at one point we thought that could be a challenge for networking. Can you talk a little bit about what it is like working out of LA as an agent, and what your vision is for the future of, the publishing industry and geography?
Yeah, I'm so glad you asked that. I am really excited just about the direction the industry is moving. Obviously, the cause of that has, been really unfortunate and just really difficult on so many people. But I think it really forced the hands of publishers to figure out a way to do remote work in a way that they were dragging their feet on before. And I will say, it was very helpful to be able to meet people in person and have that more personal connection while I was in New York. And, it has set me up well for my role now because, some of those informational interviews I did, I still regularly talk to those editors that I had met with, now as an agent. And so, yeah, there is an element that it is helpful to be in person, but people are so used to meeting over the phone, meeting over Zoom, and all of that. And I think there's also value in getting to know the literary space that you're in, and really investing in that space. Since moving back to LA last summer, I started volunteering with a literary journal based out of South Central called Dryland. And just through that experience alone, I think it has really opened some doors and opened my eyes to the possibilities of just the literary underground that exists outside of New York, and that is really doing exciting things. And so, yeah, I'm just really hopeful.
I mean, I think that really speaks to the fact that good writing, good content can come from anywhere, right? So as long as your ears to the ground and you're engaging with the community that you're in, you can find it there, right? Rhina and Sam, are you able to work remotely still? I'm curious about everyone's situation in terms of what's going on right now, if everyone's kind of working remotely still.
Rhina, go ahead.
Yeah, I am. We're doing a lot of Zoom meetings, Zoom chats, meeting with different people in the media. We actually just had a meeting with the booker for Dr. Oz. So, normally those would be like coffee dates, and so now there's Zoom calls, but they're still fun, and you still get to see the person and keep that connection strong. So it's definitely possible when you're remote.
Yeah, we are still totally remote. Our office, I think, tentatively is going to try and open in July. It could change, but it'll still be like way fewer people. And our management has been really clear with us that like they would not expect anyone to be in the office 5 days a week ever again. And they've actually given us the option, like a lot of my colleagues are going to be remote full time, and they've moved to other states and stuff like that. So I think digital media, it makes a lot of sense that you could do it from anywhere. And our industry has really responded to that. And that's kind of the theme of all big digital publications right now.
I feel like that's so encouraging. And I imagine it will be so much a part of the hiring and the interview process now, right? Talking about the work setup, whatever it may be, and just having a lot more flexibility there going forward. So I think the future is really bright there, and it's exciting to see. One thing I know we wanted to cover or talk about was any mistakes or setbacks that we've encountered in our publishing careers. Rhina, do you want to kick us off?
Sure. So I think mistakes, I mean, I've made plenty of those, but I mean, I would say that the pandemic can be a setback. I graduated in 2020, so I had a Zoom graduation. I gave my capstone via Zoom and everything, and you know, that was kind of a complete 180 of what I thought my last semester was going to look like, and it was really hard to adjust. I was inside, so I did have time to work on my capstone, but you know, I didn't get to present it in front of my classmates, and we didn't get to celebrate afterwards, and you kind of miss that camaraderie that you had with your classmates. So, you know, things like that, and just, you know, with my job being so focused on the news cycle and just knowing how different things can change, and you know, with COVID coverage and then the election, and you know, seeing how the media can really impact like how you do your job. But those are all learning experiences, and I think what's interesting about publishing, and whether that's book publishing or digital publishing, is that it's so adaptable. I've actually been kind of floored by how adaptable it has been in the past year with everything that has been going on in the news. And I think a part of that is that book publishing and media publishing, it's storytelling. And you're using an opportunity to tell stories, oftentimes stories that probably wouldn't get told. And anytime that I would think of like mistakes or setbacks, I kind of think of that and think of like, I really like what I do. And I'm sure everyone is in this program because they really like publishing, whether that's digital or book or magazine. So I think it's always important to remember that.
That's so heartening. Sam, do you have anything to share?
Yeah, first of all, just working like in journalism, I get edited all the time. So I've had to really train my brain to get used to constant feedback. And that was a little hard just as I started writing, but really training myself to think of those as learning moments has been a huge growth thing for me. And I've also really had to teach myself to slow down because I think especially if I'm working like breaking news or something like that, I feel a lot of pressure to get something up quickly. And of course, speed is important in any job, but if you're not going to do it right, it's going to be worse for you in the long run. So I think teaching myself to take a breath and just know I'm going to get things done, I've definitely had to teach myself that. But I think the biggest setback I've had is it was not easy for me right away to find a full-time job. My second year in the program, I interned at Romper, which is a parenting website, for the whole year, and I loved it. And they hired me as a part-time staff writer, but I applied for a bunch of full-time jobs, and I was hoping to have one right by the time I graduated, and just kept getting a lot of rejections, and it was really disheartening. And I really had my heart set on working for a women's publication. I wanted to work for Cosmo or Elle or somewhere like that. And that was really, I was lasered in on that. But it just wasn't working out because it's really competitive. And so eventually I found a listing for a fellowship at Insider. And I wasn't super familiar with Insider at the time, but I liked articles I read for them and their videos, which are very like, viral and catchy. So I knew it was a cool brand, but it just wasn't what I was picturing. And a fellowship felt like a step back from being a staff writer, even though I was part-time. But I applied for it, and it was a 6-month thing, and I knew it often led to a full-time job. So I kind of took a risk on it and ended up loving it, learned so much, did more writing than I ever had in my life, and got hired full time. And I think as upset as I was, it really taught me that there's no one perfect job. And often if you like box yourself into only applying for one kind of thing or at one publishing house, if that's what your focus is, I think you're going to miss out on opportunities. And the program really does give you so many skills that it's better to kind of cast a wider net, and you might really surprise yourself.
And it really seems to me that you've been able to shape your role into something that covers so many of the topics that you were interested in to begin with, right? Like, you don't work for a women's publication per se, but you cover weddings, the royal family, the Oscars, like all kinds of stuff that you may cover there too, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I think I was much more able to kind of carve those beats for myself. Like, I'm really the first wedding reporter Insiders had that's really dedicated to that on their beat. And I wouldn't have had that opportunity if I'd been at more of a legacy women's publication, because someone would have been doing it for a long time. And there's one way I would have had to do it, whereas now I've been able to create it for myself, which is way cooler.
Yep. I think that's also a plug for students listening in for startups or companies that are a little bit understaffed, because then you get to jump in and pitch in on the cool projects that you want for yourself, and there's nobody above you who's going to steal that plum instead. So it's a real great opportunity. My first full-time role was at a startup, and I was able to wear so many hats as a result of the fact that we were all kind of young and hungry and just wanted to try everything. Amanda, do you want to tell us about any setbacks or learnings?
Yeah. And I know we're running short on time, so I'll try to be brief. But I will say, the thing when I was job searching was I always had a hard time of being patient, because, it did take, I think, about 1.5, almost 2 years for me to get, my first job at Little Brown. And I had been applying, and even, as I was doing my internships and doing the program, kept thinking like, why am I still getting passed up? Like, what's going on? Like, when is it going to happen for me? And so, after about a year at Little Brown, was feeling like, you know what, I don't know if I want to be on the publishing side, and I'm so grateful for the experience here, and I've learned a lot, but just realized that I really missed the agenting side. And so, I left Little Brown and joined Park and Fine, and it was maybe 2 weeks after I started there that I got an email from an editor at Riverhead saying, hey, we have a position that's opened up. Your resume got passed to me from this other editor you had interviewed with. Are you still looking? Are you interested? And it was one of those things that was like, at the time it was like, oh, a Riverhead editor job, like editorial assistant job, like sounds like a dream job to me. And I was so like, oh my gosh, I wish I had waited and been a little bit more patient, and maybe I wouldn't have, gone back to the agency side, and if I knew that this was on the horizon. But at the same time, like, I don't really believe in regrets and, mistakes. But I will say I learned at that point, and patience has always been a struggle for me, but I've learned at that point, you're doing the work, you're putting in the time to like meet people and make connections. And sometimes it's really just about not sometimes, oftentimes it's about being in the right place at the right time. And so being patient can lead you to that spot of being in the right place at the right time. So yeah, I wouldn't be here now if I had waited and taken that job. And I'm really glad that I'm where I'm at now. But that was just such a funny, like, ironic, like, I was so impatient to like, move on to a different position. And then, this seemingly dream job came up.
Right, the best laid plans. I feel like, though, that does speak to this idea that there's no one dream job, right? Because you find your next dream job, or you make it into your dream job, as each of you, I think, has alluded to. I think we'll